Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing live show number 345. Thank you for joining us today, and happy post St. Patrick's Day for those who had the privilege of being able to enjoy the festivities from yesterday. I wonder what Mr. St. Patrick would say 1,600 years after his time here as to how we celebrate his life. I always get caught up in trivia, and it's always fun to hear the recounts of what it came from, who he was from what we know, and what we do with it now. It is fascinating. But our topic today, our one topic today that we're going to focus in on, is whether or not you have to change your short-term strategy. And I say this given in light of all that's going on right now. We've had this discussion these past couple of weeks, unfortunately, due to political and global circumstances as to the effects on what we do as an industry, hospitality. We do know in real terms that we have a lot of very strong influencers on people's decision-making process right now that are happening to them, all of us. We say them, but it's inclusive of us. We have fluctuating fuel prices. We know that they're progressively up. They have dipped and gone and so forth and so on as people begin to realize that it's a speculative market as it has always been. And as such, it's not about necessarily supply functionality as it is just the perceived value of what the purchases are, based on free market economy in that sense. That being said, it does have a negative impact on people's choices. Just simply put, there is a truism to the fact that given any 48 to 72 hour period, there can be a 10% plus variation in fuel costs. As people plan for their trips, a $500 fuel bill, which is in itself a large chunk compared to what it probably would have been around $350 the same time last year, potentially, if you look at comparisons, means that there is a difference of how much money they can spend for all the things that they have to spend it for on a travel plan. We're talking about transient travel only at this particular point. With that being said, anything from a 10% fluctuation of a $500 gas bill is an extra $50 for the same product that they would have bought had it not been a 10% increase. So that $50 to be allowed for, because gas will be required for people to make their travel plans, their driving travel plans, I should say, means that there has to be a savings elsewhere. The savings elsewhere gets translated to how much they eat out or how much they spend for eating out, or whether they choose to accommodate some of their own meals that they handle themselves, and also to the cost of where they stay. We are in the mindset and world of how we handled ourselves last summer, as we've handled ourselves historically over the years, of yieldability. We're in the business to make profit. So as such, when we see increased demand, we know that we have an opportunity to raise our rates because there is a demand for our product and it is a quantified resource. I say that with the fact that revenue managers have long since known that in the world of unconstrained demand, and for those unfamiliar with that term, it's where if you could accommodate all the demand to your market in the sense of inventory availability, that no matter how many people want to show up in your market, you would always have a room for them. That unconstrained demand is actually in a model that we have to adjust for, which is Airbnb. We know that there is a change of perception of people's travel expectations. And because of that, we know that Airbnb, VRBOs, any vacation rental process and properties are now a viable competitor to a hotel accommodation when it comes to affordability and functionality. I know I'm throwing a lot of words, and I don't mean to talk so fast about this. Excuse me, coffee. The idea that Airbnb, VRBO, and so forth have really placed themselves in a market position of accommodating the new demands on people's travel. We as hotels have several tiers of our brand development. We have limited service, which is room accommodation. Then we have full service, which is room accommodation plus amenities and outlets such as food and beverage, retail, and what have you, plus also recreational amenities. And then you have luxury, which is the overabundance of both plus then some, to put an easier way of saying it. All of them come with their price tag. In recent years, and recent being 15 years and less, we have come to a new hybrid of limited service, which is the Holiday Inn Express, for lack of a better word. They were the first to do this, really. And that was to say that they're offering additional value to staying with them, which was free breakfast. which was the hardest to accommodate for hotels that were offering no service. Is it's great that they can stay with you, but what's the closest place they can have breakfast? And it was addressed quite well in the model of Holiday Inn Express, and since has turned into pretty much most limited services brand faction tiers, the Fairfields and the Hampton Inns and on and on and on, Home Twos and what have you. The idea is that it's included with the cost. Well, that's a cost that us as an industry have to absorb into our room rate. We have to accommodate for the cost factor association for offering that in what people stay with us for. Going to the idea that we are, with our own constrained costs, that guests have their own concerns as to the finances of what they're spending. Then you add in the unconstrained capabilities of Airbnb, which are anybody that wants to offer an accommodation can get into the system, that consumer economy, the ability to do that, now means that revenue managers in our industry have to accommodate for the fact that they have a yieldability based on demand, but they also have a threshold in which they have a diminished return on that demand because of additional inventory that's being placed in the market. Placed with that, the fact that VRBO, Airbnb, vacation rental programs are now pushing an amenity value that we can't do for the most part. Some of our brand flavors can, but most of them can't. And that is, you can cook yourself. A lot of accommodations with Airbnb, not all of them, because all of them they're all over the board, from just crashing on a couch to having an extra room in a place or what have you. But for those that are full homes and or multi-room with accommodation kitchen, those are the ones that we're most worried and concerned about, because they offer now in their marketing strategy the idea that don't worry about going out. Do it when it's special, but don't do it because you have to, because you don't have the ability to cook yourself. Instead, stay with us, have the ability to accommodate your food, and enjoy the uniqueness of the destination market you have. Best grouper sandwich somewhere else, and or the best meal out at this particular restaurant, or whatever have you. Do those things, but the breakfast is handle yourself. The lunches, handle yourself. And we have the accommodations for you to do that. They've pushed a lot of that. They've also pushed the fact of why have separate rooms if the family's traveling when everybody can stay together. Let older generation in this room, your generation in this room, younger generation in that room, and everybody can kind of have a shared experience without having to trash somebody's house by having everybody show up as family. That's another accommodation to them. The ability to offer those amenities to people that are concerned about how they can afford their travel are turning into a very strong influence on people's travel choices and their research about where they're going to go and what are they going to do when they're there and how long are they going to be there and what it's going to cost for them to do all of that stuff. We do know that when it comes to air flights, it has already been told in the news, it's already been pointed out several different ways, that airlines are going to raise their rates because of fuel costs. Even if it's to accommodate for the recent fuel cost increases and then it diminishes down afterwards, there's going to be an impact. Airlines, just like hotels, are also opportunistic in more ways than one as to the ability to yield their prices according to the demand, because they literally can control and regulate supply and influence demand from it. It's a fascinating study because they control both ends of the conversation. So as such, they're going to yield. So the likelihood is a fallback that if you take a family of 4 and try to fly them someplace, the cost is going to be pretty dang high compared to if they're going to limit their choices of travel and instead drive to something that is more affordable. Now, one of the negative impacts of drive market compared to fly market is amount of time that you have traveling. Fly market, obviously, a lot easier, a lot more convenient, and a lot more compressed as to the amount of time to get to someplace compared to the amount of time it is to drive someplace. And these have influencing factors on people's vacation periods and how much time they have and so forth. But lo and behold, we have a new influencer into that market, and that is work from home capability. A lot of places, because prior to COVID, you had to be in the office until you weren't. And that meant vacation and or time away or PTO time or whatever have you. So there was a very definitive line of I have to be at work versus I don't have to be at work. Here, it's now blurred, if not actually retreated, and that is I can do work pretty much anywhere where I have a clean background and a camera when needed, but mostly a laptop and internet. And so because of that, those that have the luxury of having that as their job capability now have a fluctuation as to what their duration of time travel can be. So Drive Market is benefiting from that, because now instead of somebody saying, well, I can only get 5 days off from the office, and when you figure that we're going to take 2 days to drive somewhere, figure a maximum of 16 hours, total 2 days. But yes, there are people that are road warriors that will just crunch it all in one day and drive until they blurry-eyed. Don't recommend that. That's very dangerous in lots of ways. But if you cut it up, 8 hours of travel per day is in itself a long travel haul. And that 8 hours includes stopping every 2.5 hours, 3 hours, gas, bathroom break, meal periods, bringing the pets, doggy walks, all that stuff. That stretches time. Very similar to how agencies calculate time. When you say billable time, well, 75% of the time is billable in census per hour, but there is always a margin of 25% and more, sometimes less, of variable time. Getting a drink of water, going to the bathroom, sitting back to your desk, catching up on other email other than the project you're working on. So there's a variability of time. Same too with travel when you're driving. It's not 8 hours of driving. It is 8 hours of traveling. More likely, at the end of the day, 6 hours of actual driving, distance covered. So that creates radiuses. Radiuses of where people are looking for accommodation, radiuses of where they're looking for places to eat, radiuses of places where they're going to pause or see things or try to discover things en route to where they're going, unless they're dedicated to just getting there. Add to it the variability we just mentioned, that as long as somebody can get online, make sure they're not behind on projects, make sure they're not behind on tasks, make sure they're communicating with everybody that's communicating with them. That blurriness of not having to be in the office to do this means that 5 days that you weren't in the office traditionally before the pandemic can now be 10 days, of which there's a blend of work, and then there's days of, hey guys, I'm out of the office, don't bother me on my vacation. And then you can blur back into it before you get home. So you can double up what I'm saying on the travel times of destination distancing travel. So now you go farther because you have more time to travel farther. It doesn't mean it's cheaper. Gas is still gas and prices are still prices. But when you compare it against flights, now obviously traveling from New York to Los Angeles, way different scenario. Much easier to fly, both in time, even though it's expensive, easier in expense than it is for gas to get that whole distance. There are thresholds, and you should know your market's thresholds. Traveling from Florida to Seattle is not a drive choice. It's not, I'll pay the extra expense for flying because it's cheaper to fly than it would be to attempt to drive. When you add gas and hotel accommodations and food issues and so forth and duration of time, even if I had the time flexibility that I do, it's just not worth that distance. So if you're sitting at your property, you need to know where those distances are. Way back when we had our issues in 2008 and gas was expense and people economies were in trouble, kind of asimilar to what we're having right now for different reasons. We had a lot of push towards one tank travel. We used to, in fact, I had a website built for our hotels in Florida at the time, that the company I was working with, that was Florida on one tank. And with that, we connected the dots between the hotels as to how much distance there was between our Hotel X and our Hotel Y, and the discounts we were willing to offer, kind of like a passport program to go from one to the next, but to show that the distances were within the distance of a tank of gas so that people could calculate what they're doing. It's good to let people know what your current information of gas prices are when it comes to that, to be honest with you. But anyway, create these radiuses. And you have basically 4 radiuses that you have to consider. The first is Eminent Travel. People within 2.5, 3 hours. That is roughly 150 miles, give or take. That 150-mile radius is people that are willing to travel that day, get to where they want to go, aka 150 miles, and then want to stay to enjoy where they got to before they go back. And they can do the coming to and going from you within a very short period of time. Okay, even if they were a slow boat to China, you can see that they can make it in the same day that they left. They don't have to add a day of travel. Then you have the second radius, and that's about 300 to 500 miles. It's going to be 300 miles, not to 500 miles, 300 miles. And that is the 6 hours that day travel. They can still get to you in one day, but it's a full day of travel. So they're going to arrive probably in the evening time. They're going to spend probably a longer time with you because of the time it took to get to you. So the duration, the length of stay would be potentially longer. So they'll be with you a couple of days rather than just a day, or 3 days instead of just 2 days. So the length of stay will increase in that 300-mile range. Then you have the next range, which is a little variable. It's not a specific mileage. It's anywhere from 3 to 600 miles. 500 miles really is what I use. And what that is the multiple day travel. They travel a day, stay somewhere, and then the next day, most likely, they get to you. And that means there's an interruption between them when they first start versus the time they get to you. So at that point, you have to be more of a destination for them than a pass-through. Now, this is a marketer you have to start looking at. You have now 2 markets you have to address in that range group. Those that are coming to you and those that are passing through you. Those 2 markets in the drive market from the 3 to 500 mile distance range, okay? And remember, it's not a circle. It's actually mapping it out on roads that come through your destination, how far that mileage is, really. It's not just, 500 miles out. Well, we're out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean or the Gulf of Mexico. No, it's the distances for people to get to you. So now you have the people that are traveling through, hey, I'm on to some other place, and I'm staying with you because you're my halfway point, or you're in my intermission point. And then the other was, man, I'm coming here to see you. This is what I wanted to do. This is where I want to go. I'm going to stay with you. That means there's 2 markets. There's the one-night transient market that's crash and burn, get up in the next morning, off they go. Then there is the I'm here and I'm going to have a duration of time with you market. So that's that range. Then you have the third range, excuse me, the fourth range, which is the one I'm talking about, which is the it's too far to drive, I will fly. And these are the flight designation feeder markets. These are the people that are in Seattle that come to Florida. These are the people that are in Chicago that come to Florida. Not that they don't drive from Chicago, but the frequency of flight is higher than the frequency of travel, of driving. Those are the flight feeder markets. And we did a lot of research on pulling data off of these sites. We came with the premise that airlines are very smart, and that rather than reinvent the wheel, they know when they can either inspire demand or supply value of demand, supply to demand from market to market. So they know when people in Chicago are looking to go to different destinations. They have the history, they have the knowledge, they have the data to make those factors of saying on these dates, these people begin to travel to these locations because they have historical data to show that. They also know by the demand coming to their websites what people are looking for, the flights they're looking for, the dates they're looking for, the destinations they're looking for. All that data is usable by them to determine where people are going to want to go to. And because they have to decide how many multi-million-dollar aircraft they're going to put in supply to that demand. How many flights are they going to make from point A to point B? And how do they drive them through their hubs, and how well do the hubs handle them? So they're very much aware of the demand cycle that they provide supply for. So for that reason, we try to follow them and say, well, let's try to correlate what the airlines are doing, both in price and inventory, to what we're doing when it comes to demand and pricing. And what we found out was what we anticipated as correlations, higher prices meant higher demand, weren't necessarily the case. Sometimes it was constrained demand, higher elevated prices to yield, that's what airlines do, the fact that they were actually providing less supply but could premium price them. Didn't mean that demand was going up. It meant that they were trying to yield the service that they're providing. They just don't cancel flights saying, well, we used to fly to that place, but we don't. They have contracts. They have to still fly. But they are trying to elevate the yieldability of that flight so that the plane pays for itself, just like we do with hotels. So that correlation didn't exist for us. We would look at, more importantly, where the flights that were coming to us were coming from. If they were coming from a hub of a carrier, we didn't count on the market of the hub. We didn't say, from Atlanta, Delta, all these people coming from Atlanta to us. We didn't say that. What we did think is, well, what flights are mostly going to Atlanta that have increased their inventory? Because that's the real indicator for airlines, is how much mechanical are they dedicating to a particular route. That shows their dedication of demand. If they can sell it, and they can sell it at a decent price, they're going to put as much inventory in that market as possible to yield as much revenue as possible. So we started looking at airlift coming to the hub in comparison to our flight feeder markets that we used to historically know, the Chicagos, the Denvers, the Cincinnati's, whatever, depending upon the time of year. And we would see how much lift was being increased from those markets to the hubs that were coming to us. That gave us an indication as to the potential demand cycle going forward. And we did really cool, and we've talked about on the show, scraping of data, showing rates and inventory that's available. And we kept monitoring the ups and downs of those things to say, when they're doing this, this means that we have a higher yield option compared to when they're doing this, we have a lesser yield option. And we started calculating this to determine how much we could play poker basically with our rates and say, we're going to hold our rate integrity because we know the demand is coming. We know the demand is there. Just because we're not seeing it in booking pace right now does not mean we don't expect the demand to be here. The only changes to that would be in the sense of catastrophes and so forth, pandemics, what have you, where that pattern changed, where all of a sudden it fell off a cliff because of restriction and or pandemic and or concern about whatever. And so that demand dropped. So it helped a lot in that fourth barrier of what is our flight feeder markets. So to kind of recap on the four, you have your eminent 2.5, 3 hours travel. You have your 6-hour travel. You have your multi-day travel. And then you have your flight travel. Those are your four markets that come to you. Each one has its own segmentations. When you get past the eminent travel, you have a segment of two. Those are just staying through, and those that are staying because of a destination. Knowing your profiles of these people, knowing your personas of these people are a very critical component to this. You need to understand the difference between somebody that is really just crashing for the night on their way to someplace else. And then you have to look at those people that are going to stay there for a destination. And you have to know what the personas are of both of those. They can be similar types of people for different purposes, but understanding their search preferences, understanding their interest preferences. One of the ways you say, well, how do you figure that out? Well, one of the ways is, are they looking for just one night? Or are they looking for multiple nights? And when you know that difference, you can decide how you want to reconnect with them. How do you want to retarget them? You add on to that then the days that they're looking at, how far out and for what purpose, and you correlate that to what you know is existing. If they're booking dates around an event weekend, there's a likelihood they're coming because of the event. If they're booking a single night and it just happens to be on an event weekend, then it might be that they're either coming just for the event for the one day, or most likely they're just passing through and inconveniently they're landing on a date that has high demand. If you see it midweek, it's compared to weekends, one night versus two, then most likely they're traveling through because they're in transient from. That means that you can yield a higher rate to a point that market will bear. If you see them looking for multiple dates, okay, you have to compare the fact that they might consider going to an Airbnb, VRBO, because they're looking for the destination value that is there. They're looking for what you're offering for them to stay for multiple days with you. And for that reason, you need to make sure that you are very abundant about your value proposition in comparison to Airbnb, VRBOs, and what have you. There is still, and always has been, and something hard to shake from because it's not standard branding, that VRBOs and Airbnbs have a volatility as to expectation. Is it what they say it is, or is it worse or better? Is it in a place that they're happy with, or disappointed that they weren't told that they were in a neighborhood they didn't like? Was it not of a caliber that they expected? Those kind of things create a variability where brand and or our ability online to project ourselves correctly as independent hotels and reviews to share as such allow us the ability for confidence and trust in us that if you're going to stay at a Marriott or a Hilton or an IHG or a Hyatt or whatever, that there is expectation, but also recourse. Hey, I didn't like this. I have people I can go talk to about this. Airbnb and so forth have gone to great lengths to try to identify themselves, but they have shown again and again that they're ultimately not responsible for the Airbnb unit itself. They can offer compensations and so forth about the actual cost, but they can't offer reparations for the damage that it created in the sense of your ruined vacation and or what have you. They just simply can say, hey, we're really sorry, we'll give you your money back for it. hotels and so forth, we try to go out of our way to make sure that if we fell short of our service standards, that we would offer a means of compensation that would be equitable for that to have happen. We still have that as a leverage point over Airbnb and so forth. So with that in mind, it goes back to our original core question of whether or not you should change your short-term strategies. Here is the realities of it as I see it for now. We are in the middle of surge for spring break demand for all of the markets that are affected in that way. Not all of them are. For instance, and I found this to be really fun coming from Florida, when I first moved to Dallas, I remember going to a restaurant where we were looking for homes, and the young girl was saying, "Oh, thank goodness it's finally quiet." And I said, "Oh, wow, I would expect you guys to be ramming, jamming busy. It's going to be spring break." And she's like, "Yeah, no, we're not. We don't get busy. We get quiet because everybody leaves to go to all the places I'm used to being where they come to, Florida." And so for that reason, it was kind of a reverse of the coin where I went to a place that actually empties during spring break because they all go to the places that I'm familiar living in that is more of a spring break destination. So there is a ebb and flow to it. Those people that go to places are in fact leaving the places that they're at. The interesting part of it is that, being a restaurant, it's easier to say because that's common residential usage compared to a hotel that has a negative impact of like, oh, Christ, all these people aren't trying to come to Dallas at this point. That's back when corporate travel existed in its strong form, and it wasn't really a worry. It was actually a good opportunity for corporate travel to get great rates for that time period. But anyway, so right now we're in spring break ebb and flow. People are of the mind that they're going to do what they have planned. If anything that the pandemic has influenced in a strong way is perception of here and now. People are going to push through with their plans because if they postpone them potentially, as some had done during the pandemic, they get taken away and put on the shelf because it only got worse from the time that they could have done it to the time that they now couldn't do it. And so a lot of here now is present in a lot of people's travel choices. I know a lot of friends that as soon as it was even marginally available, they booked that planned trip that they probably weren't going to do as soon as they did because they wanted to just do something and they didn't want to miss the opportunity to do it. Obviously, price was a factor. There was so many low prices and so many guaranteed cancellation capabilities and so many things that just were too good not to do. And a lot of stuff that was just incredibly expensive prior to COVID became very affordable in the hopes of spurring on demand when demand was being held back. And a lot of people took advantage of buying those and doing those. I know friends that went to Europe and did a lot of traveling and extensively long traveling because it was affordable and it was something they could do. But then again, I think in ways that I saw stuff, they got to enjoy things in ways that I don't think I would imagine were possible. The quietness of so many high-profile destination tourism spots because of the lack of audiences. But I think there was also a bit of a mixed feeling because a lot of the residents of those places were unable to actually go and walk around the streets as much as the tourists were able to go to. So there was this feeling of, not the same kind of thing. So there was a benefit of seeing things in a comfortable way without tourist saturation. And then there was the drawback of we feel a little odd because we're able to do this and there's so many that couldn't. So it was a mix. I got feelings from people that had a mixed feeling that they enjoyed what they did, but in some ways felt a little odd that they were able to enjoy something that some people weren't. So with all that in mind, right now I'm saying that for the spring break surge, I believe that everything is going to happen the way it's anticipated unless another dramatic twist occurs, which will pull the rug out from under the demand satisfaction that is out there. I do not think it is of the level and scope that we experienced last summer when the first pent-up demand was able to get into market and to try to do the travel that they had been kept away from. Though that surge and the places that those people went was amazing. It did create, however, a fallout with the resurgence of the pandemic. And let us not ever forget that people are being affected by that every day. I say that, but we are affected by many other things, from heart attacks, what have you. So the fact that if it is that it's still very much there and is potentially avoidable to take all of your shots and so forth. So not to go off on the tangent, sorry. The idea of it is that March will be because people want it to be. They are going to do what they want, or planned on doing. They're going to do what they can, regardless of gas prices. They'll absorb the hit. They'll take the negative impact that they have. They'll do all what they need to do to enjoy what they have, and the kind of possible feeling that it could be taken away, because we've all experienced that. So that's, I think, going to be there. Whether we're going to have a summer similar to what we had last year, I have doubts. I believe that we are going to have good summer demand. I think, given the fatigue of people and the diminishment of the hard impact of the pandemic as it exists right now, that people are willing to say the easiest way, roll the dice. They're going to take the risk into consideration. For those of us, we'll take precautions as best we can to make sure that we don't create a problem for ourselves or others. But for the most part, I think we're going to try to get back to the things that we weren't able to do for the past 2 years. I think summer will have its demand. I think it'll have better than average demand. When I say average, being pre-pandemic, I don't think it's going to have the blind silliness that it had last summer. A lot of it being tempered for the fact that the costs for this summer are going to be elevated compared to the costs of last summer. The unbridled demand of last summer being the first opportunity for people to travel, compared to some of it being satiated by this point, or what will be this summer at this point. I think we'll mitigate that a little bit. I think the sticker shock of what we as an industry did on raising our rates to ridiculous levels is residual for us. I think a lot of people are going to try other places to stay, having been completely disgruntled and disappointed with the exploitation of so many hotels that actually forfeited their good reviews simply to cash in on the demand, short-term demand that they had last summer. I think the negative impact that those choices will now have on them, because people are going to look and see the really crappy reviews that people gave and the indifference of the hotel, and trying to hide behind the fake veil, the thin veil of we didn't have staff and so forth. Then why'd you charge so much? Why'd you charge me for rack rate or back of the door rate when your restaurant was still closed and you didn't tell me your restaurant was closed, or that your amenities were closed, or what have you? I paid the most premium price that you can charge by law, and you gave me the least amount of quality. Plus, on top of that, you didn't even offer the regular service to my room that you would normally have given. So I paid for basically less, is the perception that a lot of hotels are having to overcome this summer. You're going to see a lot of exploratory other places to stay that might be a little bit more sensitive to their guest satisfaction and experience, and historically maintain guest satisfaction and experience. I think you're going to see a lot of people look at vacation rentals in a whole new light, that their disillusionment with brand who self-admittedly says that their rewards program are to the benefit of the owners of the hotels and not to the guests, I think is going to come back and bite them. I think that the reality of direct communication with our guests and developing a relationship of trust, of saying, we want to provide you the service that we are capable of. Here's realistically our levels of service, where this is our rates and so forth. That honesty and direct communication and helpfulness is what we discussed in other live shows about the difference between being a lighthouse versus a lantern. And for those that may not have caught that live show, the idea was we as marketers for hospitality were like a lighthouse. Here we are. This is what we are. Here's our rates and dates. Come here. This is where we are. This is what we did. It's a broadcast. It's light goes everywhere. Okay. To a lantern, which is, how can I help you? Let me guide you through this. What is it you're looking for? Let me see if I can give that to you. What information can I provide to you? That guidance perspective, that ability to be at direct communication with our guests or potential guests, and seeing how can we provide the services, being clear and honest about our services and our products and what our locations, and that truth in dialogue is what's really going to create the relationships. Also, people, and I think this is a byproduct of all that's going on with privacy and security, is we already knew people were aware of their value of their data. Not everybody, but most people are. And they also realize the value of the acknowledgement of allowing people to communicate with them. We see the barrage of spam and texting and phone calls and everything else. So now people have created buffers for themselves. Here's my junk email. Here's my junk phone number. Here's whatever it is, because I don't have to deal with it. It just goes into a pile of crap. But for the places that they want a dialogue with, that they want value with, they want the relationships so they can be identified and appreciated for who they are, they're willing to provide that data under the auspices that that place will keep it honest and true and be clear about its usage and not defy that trust by using it for other things that they did not say they were going to use it for. If you do that and you communicate clearly, directly, I believe that you're going to be able to create a solid relationship with guests that are willing to book with you, especially during the business cycle demands of summer and beyond, that people are going to say, so somebody else dropped their rate in market. I don't know them. I don't have the relationship with them. I don't know if it's true, if it's worth it. It's not a price. That $20 is not the issue for me, in as much as it is the expectation being met that I know what I'm coming to by going to this place rather than that place. If you can create that kind of perception from your guest, you will succeed against anybody else that's trying to do rate wars with you. That being said, you can't just start modifying your relationship with and begin to exploit the fact that now somebody has that belief in you, that you begin to leverage that to get more money from them, because there's a lesser and lesser tolerance from the guest of that happening. As soon as they begin to see you stretch the rubber band, they might like, ooh, you're not who I thought you were. I'm severing it off and going off and finding somebody else. That's what we're facing with, is a more educated consumer, a more savvy, aware consumer, and that have a lot of influencing factors on their ability to travel. We talked about transient. Let's talk a little bit about business for a second. Business, this is the first year that probably business travel has been put back into the budget for a lot of companies. Strangely enough, all of the rhetoric from companies saying we can't operate effectively remotely, everybody has to be in the office, we have to have culture, and there are aspects of that which are true. Most of it is BS. Most of it can be done in a flexible environment. I say that with the caveat being that certain industry types or certain business types do need stronger interpersonal interactions that go beyond the screen conversations. There needs to be the ability to read body language and get a sense of people and have that those uncomfortable pauses and the loose banter conversations and the things that go all along with the interpersonal experiences of one-on-one in-person conversations that don't happen or translate well in this environment, and certainly don't happen to translate well in emails and texting and so forth. But for the most part, this is the first year that businesses are going to have travel budgets. But with that, and we've talked about this before, probably a higher criteria and threshold for endorsement of those business travel choices are in play. The conference that you used to go because you used to go to the conference is now probably under the scrutiny of what have we gotten from that conference in times past, and a little bit of the chicken and the egg and the egg and the chicken. Vendors are trying to choose if they should participate based on the audience potential of those that are attending, and those that are attending are basing it on the participation of the vendors that are showing. So it's kind of a stalemate of, well, you go first, no, you go first, no, you go first. Conferences like that have issues. Hybriding them to say, regardless, the value proposition of vendors are whether they show up in person, which is our preference, or resolve to be in a hybrid where they watch remotely, which is our deference. We will have an audience worthy of you to invest in being a part of our conference. That's going to be a mainstay. That has to happen. By the same token, business travel for the purpose of sales has to be under the criteria threshold of, will it have the higher potential for in-person dedication? Obviously, there is a value of saying, by making this trip, I'm showing how dedicated we are to get you as our client. That goes without saying, because there's a volatility to travel right now that makes that value inherently increased. Be like, hey, look, this is not the real big time for people to travel. I don't like traveling. We could have easily done this on the screen, but I'm up at your doorstep because that's how important you are to me. That has a high value right now, and good businesses are taking advantage of that. By the same token, if it's just a feel good, stop by, shake your hand, we're committed to you still, might not get past the muster of going over and getting approved for travel. Add to that most people business-wise traveling, because of the higher criteria of traveling, are going to try to put more into it, the pleasure conversation, the business and leisure conversation. Okay, if I want to go to New York to meet with a client and or conference and or this and or business thing, and the company's getting me there, I'm going to extend my time there because I can actually work from there with a laptop and the internet. I can still work from there. So I'm going to make it where I'm going to add a couple extra days and have a personal chance to see New York, which I haven't been able to travel the past 2 years. So let me go see what's going on in New York, because I'm there for business anyway. So that pleasure combination is a marketing value proposition for us as hotels. beyond looking at just the pure segmentation of it as business travel, how can we expand that business travel that we are getting, which is much less than what we've had historically prior to COVID? How can we expand that into a pleasure component? Here's your business travel. What can we incentivize to extend your stay to make it a pleasure stay? Pleasure is just the hybrid of business and leisure. These types of strategy conversations you should be having. Right now, we're ending the first quarter of budget for a lot of companies, which means they're looking at their second quarter, third quarter perspectives. We now have what will be 3 months under our belt in 2022. What's been the impact of our expectations, forecast, to budget and then to forecast, and then to the actuals that we've acquired? Is there a pace that is consistently comfortable with what we forecasted to feel that the second quarter will work the same way? And if so, then the things that we budgeted for, like travel, business travel, what have you, stay in place. If they don't, they're first in jeopardy, because we know the fallback is, yeah, guys, I'd love to have been with you in person, but blah, 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 is in place, blah, 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 whatever, pandemic, whatever. And this is our best way of getting communication to you without the jeopardy of the travel. And a lot of companies are going to be accepting of that. With that, we also have the concern from a marketing perspective of how much do we oversell what we're capable of doing. We experienced that firsthand in a very bad way last summer, where we sold well beyond our service skill, well beyond our service levels, and suffered from that. Our guests really suffered from that. We suffered from the repercussions of a bad choice, but our guests suffered the most because of our bad choice. And how well can we not have that happen again? We have a labor issue. It might be lesser now because the finances of things and the expense of things have gone up. The people who have been looking for career shift and or side hustles or different things than what they were doing before, they're not being as productive with trying it as they did before. And therefore, they're going back to their old jobs because they need to have an income because of the expenses of life. That may be the case. The other is that we really did, unfortunately, in a negative way, impact those people that were with us. I watched an interesting news piece last night about a restaurant that was not in Florida that closed for a day because of rude customers into the restaurant. That the owner was so concerned about the mental and the emotional well-being of their team for being berated for they were understaffed and people were snapping their fingers and being intolerant and being snarky and all this other stuff. She closed for a day and said, guys, I closed for the day. I don't need your business. I mean, I want your business, but it's better for me not to have business today and let my staff rest and feel better about the fact I care about them than it is for them to open the next day only to get berated by you again. There was such a groundswell of support for the restaurant, of people coming in to apologize and to be supportive of the restaurant because they were dedicated to their team members. They didn't get more people hired. They still are way short of what they need. But the idea was that there was an understanding that the guest had or the customer had for the staff. We haven't gotten there yet for our industry. Our hotels haven't made amends for our affairs that we did last summer. And as such, we've lost a lot of very skilled, talented lifers, people in hospitality that enjoyed being a server, enjoyed being a bartender, enjoyed being a cook, enjoyed being whatever it was that they did in hotels and what have you, because they got furloughed in a very bad way, or they realized that what they were settling for was way less than what they could get elsewhere. And so those people are not coming back. And we haven't done a very good job of making sure that we present well for those people that are looking at career choices, that hospitality be one of them. So the reason why I bring that up, and we've had many discussions about that, is because it impacts our ability going forward in short term as to how we're handling the demand we're now current with the spring break, ebb and flows, those that lose the people to go to spring break and those people that are receiving those people for spring break. There is that aspect, but also is the value proposition that we have to mitigate what we sell at market price for the actual service levels that we can provide. Because if you're a hotel that exploded rates last summer at the detriment of your guests with poor service and poor amenities, with the excuse of being, hey, it's the pandemic, I can't open my restaurant, I don't have staff, or whatever it was, real or not, that you gave them, and you try to pull that off again this summer in the long-term strategy that people are now booking for, you are putting another nail in your business coffin. Because By doing that, you're reaffirming with people that money is more important to you than the service you're providing to acquire it. And that is a problem. We make all these fun, contrite statements. I take care of my team so my team can take care of our guests. Well, great. But if you're not taking care of anybody, your team or your guests, just simply to cash the checks that the business provides for you, you will begin to be recognized in that way. And as such, compared against people in your market that aren't doing that, or maybe your whole market's doing that. And people are going to say, well, rather than go to that destination anymore, everybody seems to just want their hand out. I'm not going to go there. I'm going to find another place to go to that will treat me a little bit nicer than what I'm being treated there. That's a powerful switch. Remember, consumers have that ability. So short term, you should be already understanding who's coming in and what their tolerance for having to come in was. Are they beyond their budget? They're spending beyond their capability of taking on the debt that it's incurring, which a lot of people might be doing because of the price increases of so many things, that they're still dedicated to having a spring break travel experience. If so, most likely, they're least likely to come back in the summer and or spend less if they did, because of the expense that this particular cycle of travel did. Now, there is a symbiotic relationship between those that are traveling now and those that travel in the summer. Two key elements is the education school systems and the age and the classifications of the family groups that are associated with them. For most parents traveling with children up to the age of 13 to 15, this is a family vacation experience. They're doing this because it's a chance for them to travel with their family to do family things. They may do the short-term travel trip now because of spring break being a more compressed time, and do more of that 3 points of the 4 that I mentioned in drive travel. They might do the 150 mile, the 300 mile, and maybe on a stretch the 500 mile up. Less likely they're going to do the flying, just because the cost expenses and the time duration for the cost expenses, there may not be as much in the flying feeder markets. Summertime, that's completely different. But if they extend themselves to do that, then it's least likely they're going to have the same travel experience come summer. They're going to do something that's going to be longer in durability in summer, which means it has to be more affordable per day for them to do that. So their choices might go into the VRBO, Airbnb worlds, and or camping, and or RVing, and or all-inclusivity, destination, single spot kind of stuff. And they're least likely to possibly make any short drive travel plans in lieu of doing long-term. Again, demographically, income level, age of family have a lot of influencing factors. It's not, you can't put all of them in just one pile. They're all different piles with different mixes. The other is that for the above 15-year-old family nesting groups, you have a different purpose of travel. The travel flips to being more of a shared travel experience. Above 15, the children tend to be less engaged with the parental guidance of the travel and more a participant in the travel choice and or travel destination value. It also means that there is a different blending of people that travel. Friends of your kids might travel with them. Parents of the friends of the kids might be inclusion with you as well, or vice versa. Your child is traveling with, and or there's a collaboration with others. Because of that, there's a lot of opinions and interest to resolve, because now the travel choice isn't what the parents decide with a moderate influence to the children. Now the travel experience is shared with the children as to what they're going to do. And more likely than not, most of the activities on this travel will be dual. There will be things they do together, but there will also be things they do apart, because that wonderful age of 15 and up, they're beginning to want their independence of choice. They're wanting their direction of what they want. And so these destinations will be related to how each of the people in the family can enjoy the travel experience, the things that the children, the teenagers can do that the parents don't, and vice versa, but still have enough that both can do. Usually the both still enough that they can do tend to be more dining experience related and or unique singular feature destination. They're Carlsbad Cavern. We're all going into the cavern, compared to let the kids go and they'll tell us what it's like. Those event kind of driven things will be shared, but the roller park, whatever, skateboard park or something is probably not going to be something the parents are going to go, certainly not do. There's a mix. There's always variations to each, but these are usually the trends associated with this. Then you transition into above that. You have then the people that their kids aren't traveling with them. Okay. They might still be in college and so forth, and they might still try to cross paths with them, but the likelihood is not a lot of travel is going to be done with college kids. College kids will want to try to do things that are with their college peers at that point. They'll still come back to the parents' level, but most part, their travel plans are usually in collaboration with their new social networks as to whom they travel with. And parents will tend to possibly do things for the first time in a long time that doesn't include their children. They might have some crossover, and they might try to do a shared one. That's usually in the summer, though, to be honest with you. College kids during spring break do college kids things. Parents do non-family things at that point if they don't have any younger kids to do things with. Then you have the empty nester conversation coming in, those people that don't have kids. This is not a time of year that they tend to travel most at, because they'll run into a lot of families, and they're not there with family, and they don't see it as a positive impact on their travel. It's not because they're against kids, don't like kids or whatever, although some might. It's the fact that their world is not involving children. So the distraction and or patience or accommodations of children is something that they don't prefer in their leisure time. So they're likely to travel post spring break, but they're looking now for what they want to do. Because for them, it's just a choice of being able to get the time allocated from their work to do this. Again, more flexibility if they have the opportunity to work remotely allows for a larger, broader perspective of travel expectations. Doesn't mean they have any less restrictions financially on what they can choose to do. They have the same issues of gas prices and rental prices and home owning prices and cost of goods prices and supply chain issues and all the other stuff that we're facing, plus inflation and plus the pandemic and everything else we throw into the pot of happiness. But for them, they have less about worrying about the components of family. Now, this also brings us into another category, moving up into the age groups of definition. Before then you get into the family orientation where you have people that are post-college, just married. There's that group of people. No children as of yet. They have different travel expectations for themselves. Better expendable income, more destination memory-making choices and vacations. They're less likely to have a let's just do this kind of thing than it is let's go do this kind of thing. Then you have the small family, and they start that whole nascent life cycle of now that we have an infant, can we even travel? If so, how far and for what? Usually those are the short-term drive markets. Let's just get somewhere else other than home for a little while. And it has to be convenient and comfortable. And it's not so much about doing things as just being in other places. And it cycles through. Then you get into the family that is supporting generational families. The families that have now taken in their older families to either be supportive or they're sharing time with them. This usually comes first inspired from the older group of people that are wanting to share experiences with their children and their children's children. It usually comes down this way. The families that have the younger children, the early 30s, mid 30s, later 30s, early 40s, that range time of ages, usually have grandparent interactions. They're the ones that say, hey, we know you're not financially in a position to carry the burden of the whole travel experience, but we're so much wanting to share time with you and the grandkids. Here we are. Either they first go and visit them, or they just say, I will help with all this, if not pay for all of this to do this. So when it comes to marketing, you're marketing to them. Even though demographically you're talking about families with younger children, they're influencing the decisions of the grandparents. Grandparents want to do what makes the family happy. And so they're going to listen a lot to the parents and the grandkids, the parents of the grandkids, if the grandkids are old enough, whatever their interests are. But they're the ones that make the purchase choice, but it's influenced by them. Just like kids influence up to the age of 13, the parents' choice of travel. They influence the parents' choice of travel based on what they would like to do versus the parents' affordability of doing it. And so you can target the things that make kids interested, but they're not the ones choosing the purchase. Same too with the dynamic of older family interblending and connecting with the younger family. They're the purchase makers, but they're not the purchase influencers. So you have to know how your targeting goes towards those demographics. Then you transition into a different level past this. And this is where the family with the children, and regardless of that, the spectrum of ages, it can go from a small infant all the way up, are now responsible for the caregiving of their older family members, where the older family member is being cared for by the younger family. And at this point, it shifts not from the grandparents or the older family members being the purchase makers, as it is the family that's supporting them and taking care of them are now the influencers and the facilitators for the travel experience, putting it bluntly, to make sure that they don't miss opportunities to spend time with the older family that they're taking care of, but needing to make it different. So it's not the mundane, everyday thing. It's like, let's go do this. We used to do this as a family when I was a kid. It'd be great to have you come with us and go down memory lane kind of thing. Those things, you need to identify the fact that the family members, the younger family members, are both the decision maker and the facilitator. And yes, it's influenced because the older parents and family will have influence on what is chosen from, but the ultimate decision is now in the younger family's wheelhouse. That's the spectrum we're looking at. Now, push that towards spring break, and you see where there is definitely those people we want to chase down, and definitely they're going to do what they plan on doing because they're afraid of it having been taken away, which was what we learned in these past 2 years. But I think once we get past the short-termness of that, and then there's the empty nesters and those that aren't with kids and so forth, they're going to take opportunity to travel after the spring break cycle runs, usually after Easter. And you also have transition between snowbirds that are going back from the south up to the north because the weather's shifting and so forth. You have lots of seasonal changes that are happening for the next 6 to 8 weeks. But you're also going to begin dealing with the fact that people are going to do earlier research and begin to make decisions sooner because they realize there's a fluctuation in prices, there's a fluctuation in cost, and there is, as they learned from last summer, the possibility of a lack of supply for the places that they want to go to. So they're going to preemptively find these things sooner rather than suffer the way they did by waiting too late last time, where all of a sudden everyone's like, wait a minute, what? Everybody's trapped. Let me go look. And they went from $400 to $600 a night in one day because we were able to leverage that rate because of the demand that we're experiencing. They want to not be on the bad side of that conversation. They're going to go look at how soon can I make my choices? What are they for? What are my cancellation requirements, which we educated them on? What are the things that I want to do? And let me start quantifying my budget for this so that I can make sure that if I don't have enough money now, that I have enough money by then. And if so, I want to lock these things down so I can solidify, because there's going to be variable prices no matter how much you lock things down. If they're driving, there's going to be gas prices. If there's dining out, there's going to be price fluctuations on dining out. All those things are already going to be bad enough. They have to have a margin for that. But if they can lock down the stable prices like hotel rooms and flights, they will. So we're kind of at the end of this. We went and talked, I think, very much about the topic directly, which is, do I need to change my short-term plans? The answer is no. By that, on the same token, what you should be more focused on right now is identifying and segmenting the people that you do have interest from, what they're interested for, when they're interested in coming, and cultivating the communication directly with them to facilitate what they need to understand you have to offer and what you are willing to do so that they can create the relationship with you to want to do it with you and create that purchase decision with you. And then continue to keep the information coming to them as to any revisions and changes that they should be aware of, policies, changes, mandates, whatever have you, which are now a living, breathing existence of our life, what they need to be aware of, good or bad, so that they can make a good decision. Because if you choose not to tell somebody something bad's going to happen or something bad did happen, and then they find it out, they distrust you because they're not sharing it with you, and that decision might be made for you without you even having had the chance to save yourself. So honesty, trust are the key elements of communication, direct communication. Cultivating direct communication is a key element. And long-term strategy for the next identifiable demand cycle of summer needs to be cultivated now. You need to identify who you're talking to now, and you need to make sure the information is in front of them now. And that will be most beneficial for you. So with that, thank you for, as always, the privilege of your time listening to me today. Thank you for everyone that's been watching me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, multiple pages and platforms for all of it, except for LinkedIn. There's only one. Also for everyone watching on us on TV. As every week we do, the live show is free on our Hospitality Channel TV station. The TV channel is on Roku, Google, Amazon, and Apple. Just simply look for Hospitality Channel and it plays. There is a subscription portion to it, which has additional content beyond it, so forth and so on. It's $4.99 a month. Discounted as if you want to buy multiple months, whatever. which offers more content specifically just for hospitality. We're not trying to be a travel channel, food channel, whatever. It's all about being in hospitality, what it's like to work at restaurants, what it's like to be in hotels, what training can be available to different places, what different jobs there are, and so forth. So it's a lot of information about hospitality. So we hope you can join us on that. As always, our archive of this show and our podcast, which will be a recap when we do a podcast every week, audio only. That's on iTunes and Stitcher and all the rest of all the platforms. 39 platforms, actually, and is available. You can watch us on the Hospitality Channel, as I said, and the archive is at hospitalitychannel.tv. All the replays are there, plus show notes and translations. We're translated in 11 languages from 39 countries, so forth and so on. So with that, once again, my name is Loren Gray. Please email me if you have any questions or suggestions of topics at loren@hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com. I answer each and every email related to the live show and the podcast as well. So please, and any feedback you have is always appreciated. So with that, until next Friday for show number 346, yes, we've been doing it for 8 years every week. I look forward to talking to you all then. Until then, have a great rest of the day, rest of the week, weekend, and look forward to you talking next week. Bye all.